Hey guys, it's TechRain here. Today's video, we're going to answer a very interesting question. Are AMD GPUs actually good for streaming? That is right. If you guys didn't know, in the past, I've heard rumors about AMD GPUs with their drivers not performing good for gaming, nor actually been great for their video encoders for encoding streaming. But I want to actually answer this question. Are AMD GPUs still bad in 2024? Or can you actually use the game and stream on them at the exact same time? And are they a good, viable streaming GPU? So that's why I picked up the RX 6600. I plan to do a few videos on this and actually compare it to a NVIDIA GPU for encoding. So if you want to see which one's better, NVIDIA or AMD for streaming, then definitely get subscribed. But I want to figure out, are they actually bad or are they actually good? And that's the question we're going to answer here today. For our testing, we're of course going to use OBS Studio and have a really easy loadout. We're going to have the gameplay for display capture in the background. Of course, we got to have a face cam to make it real life scenario. And then we of course have another scenery just for, of course, our face cam. So we have access to both things here, which is nice. Now, the interesting part is when we get into our settings, because this is not like we're using NVIDIA, we're using the AMD encoder. So I want to show you guys that because that's the part where it's like kind of figure things out. So for our output for streaming, we're of course going with control bitrate for CBR. For bitrate overall, it's just 6000. That's the best thing you can do for like Twitch and stuff, and also especially Kick. And then we got also a quality preset set to high with 0 B frames. And this is kind of just our default settings for action encoding. Now, we of course make sure to have our output mode on advanced so we can get a little bit more crazy with it. But our actual video encoder is where it gets interesting. We're using, instead of NVENC, we're using the AMD encoder, which is the AMD hardware H.264 encoder. So you could use like X.264, but I would never recommend encoding on your CPU. There are some benefits to it, but if you're going to encode on your CPU, you better have a 64 core, 128 thread CPU. And I know no one out there has that, so you want to go with your GPU encoder, especially since most of them nowadays, especially NVIDIA, have a separate part of the GPU that's just dedicated to actually encoding. The only thing that really grabs from the GPU is just VRAM, and most times around you'll be good. And especially on this GPU, it has 8 gigs of VRAM, so I assume we'll be able to play games on low to medium settings, maybe high depending on the game in itself, but we'll probably be using 6 gigs of VRAM for that, or maybe 8 gigs, and then on top of that an additional 2 gigs just focus on the encoding the stream. Now, I don't expect to use all 2 gigs, but now if you are wondering what our recording settings are, because we're going to do a recording test later here, we're going to be of course using the same encoder, the AMD hardware encoder, and then we of course have all the audio tracks enabled. We're going to use I can't even say this one, it's always weird to say, CQP, god, I messed that up so hard, with a level of 21 for our actually encoding, which just makes the quality look good. And then we have our preset to quality high, B frame set to 0. Now we will have another test here. Instead of having CQPC, oh my god, I butchered that, CQP, we will be using CBR 12,000 to kind of just compare how it would actually perform with actually like recording, because I'm kind of curious to see how it does, especially since if we're gaming on like 2 of the most demanding games I used to play on the past, which was Rust and also Apex Legends. These 2 games are interesting because in the past you couldn't really game on Apex and stream it with your actual GPU because it'd be too much of a load on your GPU to actually hurt it. Same thing with Rust, you couldn't really game or stream on the exact same PC. Like you could, but you'd be setting your streams to the bare minimum and your games to the bare minimum, so it'd work, but not the best thing in the world. But especially in 2024 and just 2020, most of the GPUs that have come out now are so good, especially the 30 series and the recent series from AMD, that they've actually have so much performance to them that it would be not of a surprise to say you could actually encode and game on a single PC setup for those 2 games, even more games that are more demanding. Just more of a matter of like what you're building. I would say dual PC setups are no longer very viable. Like they still work and they still have some benefits to them, but I wouldn't recommend anyone building a dual PC setup unless you know you're making a good amount of money from streaming. Then that would be the time you would focus into that, because there's a lot more quality to be made there. But on single PC setups, if you just get a high spec PC, most times around you'll be able to play on high settings of the medium and easily encode a nice 1080p stream. So the first thing we're gonna do is do a streaming test. So the first game we tested was Apex Legends. Now keep in mind, right off the rip, I encoded the stream to Twitch to be 6000 bitrate, and then the settings for the game just to be set to low, what you need to play the game to get the most FPS possible. And the stream actually turned out pretty good. It is very viable to watch, especially on mobile, since all the pixels are a lot more condensed into a small device. On PC, it's a little bit blurry, but then again, I'm not surprised since we are encoding on the actual PC that is gaming at the exact same time. Now, this is still very good. We didn't have any frame drops. We did drop like 12 frames in the beginning, but that was just launching OBS Studio on the first start, because anytime you launch OBS Studio, you're of course going to lose some frames here and there. But the big thing is, are we going to lose frames when we actually start gaming in itself? And we didn't drop any frames at all, which was nice to see. Especially since when we upgraded our actual, settings to the high settings, just the basically everything maxed out for Apex Legends. Even then, when we had like all of our VRAM in use, plus the encoder streaming, it actually turned out pretty good. Like, I was actually surprised. It was still blurry here and there, but it was definitely viable to actually game on. Not many frame drops at all, which is nice. We did drop like another 12 frames, but after that, it really didn't mess with anything else. I did notice a little bit more blur though, because of the fact that we were using all the VRAM at once, plus we were streaming on top of it. It became a little bit more blur compared to using low settings. So streaming Apex Legends on this GPU is actually viable, which is cool to see, because that means any other game that is FPS shooter, you can do the exact same thing and have similar results. The next game we tested was Rust while streaming. Now, keep in mind, I did have the game on medium settings for the default, which is nice, and the quality of it was actually pretty good. Now, compared to Apex Legends like earlier, it didn't have as much blur. Like, it still had blur when we were walking around, just because how intensive this game is. But it was a lot more detailed and visible to actually see, which is nice, even though this game's probably only hitting around like 80 to 60 FPS. Now, I didn't keep an FPS counter up, but most times around when I'm on these servers with lower end GPUs, it's around that fresh point. And it didn't feel like at all we were playing below 60 FPS, because if you play below 60 FPS, you can definitely feel that just the drag of it. Next thing we do is try Rust at high settings. Now, keep in mind, I would not recommend doing this. It had the same effect as Apex Legends where we maxed everything out. It became a little bit more blurry. Like, it still looked good, especially in the snowy tundras, but there's not really much going on in the first place. It's kind of just a white flashbang more than anything else. And the guy that almost tried to kill us, which was lovely, it was definitely playable and definitely like visible to actually watch. I would say this turned out pretty good for our results. Now, streaming on this GPU in gaming is doable. The question is, how about actually recording and actually gaming? Because that's going to be a lot more demanding, because we're not recording or streaming 6,000 bitrate. We're doing double that amount, and to even triple with the actual CQP. So for Rust, for actually recording, we of course did medium settings again, and we did the CBR for a constant bitrate of 12,000, and the recording was similar to that of Twitch. For upload, it did look slightly better, however it was still blurry, so it wasn't very good results. Like, yeah, you could use it to record, but in all fairness, I wouldn't honestly do this at all. Now, we did the same test again, but this time we used CQP for level 21 for Rust, and we started off with medium settings in the beginning like we did earlier, and the results were actually quite surprising. It actually looked way better, because the actual level for QCP is actually more focused on the quality of the file and how big the file is actually going to get. So you want this if you want to look good, but at the same time too, it's going to take multiple gigs to actually like get a nice recording in. Most times around, it won't be that much. Like QCP for level 21, we did was it 7 minutes of recording Apex Legends at low settings. It was a 3 GB file, which is still pretty big in all fairness. But for the level of quality you're getting while gaming and recording and having no hiccups was surprisingly really good. Now, when we did do Apex Legends and we did QCP for level 21 on high settings, we did lose some FPS. We lost around like 44 frames, but then again, there was a lot going on. Plus, on top of that, we were smoking a lot in the fights, but it never really actually hindered the gameplay in itself and actually how it looked. So I would say encoding and recording on this actual GPU will turn out really good. Now, the real question is, how would it actually perform while you actually multi-stream while gaming on the device? I don't think it's going to work, but that's what we're going to figure out next. So I have Fortnite on the lowest settings possible. That way we can just kind of play the game with no issue. So what we're going to do is load up our OBS here, which I have in the background if it let me tabs out, that is. And what we're going to do is do display capture, start streaming the Twitch. This is going to be 6,000 bitrate, and then start streaming the Kick as well, which is another 6,000 bitrate, but then we're encoding 2 streams at once. And we're going to see if we actually crash. The real question though is, when we start moving around and stuff like that, will the game start iffing out, or will the recording on the stream start tweaking at all? Because usually if you start multi-streaming and gaming at the same time, it will like start tweaking or bugging. So I'm curious to see if we're gonna have any frame drops. So frame drops, we have not dropped a single frame yet, which is good to see. We are getting currently around 100 FPS over on this, which is cool. This Captain America shield thing is the most OP / annoying thing ever. No, I'm dead. Are you serious? That's the way I die, bro. That's the way I die. We dropped a total of 162 frames. So we did lose some frames from multi-streaming. So it looks like when I was multi-streaming, it was doing its thing. I guess during the fight when I was streaming to both platforms during this whole sequence, it got more blurred in the fight because there's a lot more going on. But it looks good still. I'm not entirely sure where the big frame drop was at though. I would assume it would have been in the part where all the action's at, but that doesn't seem to be the case. I assume it was just a consistent buildup of things tweaking during the stream. So yeah, multi-streaming is doable on this GPU. Definitely not recommended though. You can do it. Let's see if there's any problems on Kick either with the stream when it was fighting. This is where the frame drop would be at, but no. So yeah, I'm assuming the frame drop happened just throughout the minutes of the stream. It wasn't at like a one part where like you just see the frame and such chugging. So the question is, can AMD GPUs actually stream and game at the exact same time? And are their coders actually bad? And are they bad for gaming? So the answer to all that is no, they actually are pretty good for streaming and in actually encoding video and just gaming in general. I'm actually really satisfied with the results. Like I thought it was not going to be able to stream and game at all. Like, or maybe it was going to have some problems here and there, but it was able to do everything I wanted it to. Now, the quality of the stream wasn't particularly the best, but it was under like if like reading a sentence, it was legible. Like when you watch the stream, you can understand what's going on. Besides the quality being a bit blurry, everything else besides that though was awesome about it, which was fantastic. Especially recording, when we just recorded on the actual device in itself with was a QCP level 21, that looked so good. That looked so good. So AMD GPUs are actually like very viable, so I can definitely start like recommending them now for people who are looking to game and stream and looking to get a GPU for a budget. So yeah, I don't know, AMD is kind of beating Nvidia here for the price point, but then again, Nvidia has some other benefits to it, so I'm really going to be curious now to see compare Nvidia to AMD encoders to see which one performs better. I'm curious to see what's actually going to be happening with that though. But if you guys don't want to miss out on that video, you're curious to see what happens, then make sure to get subscribed. And if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to smash the like button, and I'll see you for the one. Tech Grant out.